We are born men in order to live, not to kill. You must break the chain. Only then can we be free of this terrible cycle.
He had this afro hairdo.
Is anyone willing to stand tall against this malicious threat? Is there not one of us brave enough to hold his ground and say, "Not in my city"?
Come on, Harper.
Over the past year, the northern part of the country has been taken over by Islamic extremist groups.
The Mali military has been unable to cope with them. They in turn mutinied and then collapsed the Mali government.
And since Mali is surrounded by other former French colonies, the situation is of particular significance for France.
There was a UN resolution that we act, there be an international effort that member states help to make sure that the Mali government, its forces, its defense forces, were able to secure from the Islamic forces that were securing themselves in the north of that country. Well, all that changed last week. There was a fear that these rebel forces would be moving south into the capital region. France has been there now since Friday, bombarding targets in northern Mali.
Hi, my name is Tyrone Drummond, correspondent for PressForTruth.ca. I'm here in Ottawa, where this week our Prime Minister Stephen Harper did welcome the French Prime Minister on his two-day visit, where they talked about a number of subjects, such as the French-led mission to Mali.
The Prime Minister of France, Monsieur Ayrault, Jean-Marc Ayrault, thanked Canada for its contribution in that country. Canada has been contributing one C-17 transport plane, an enormous plane, a plane that you can actually fit a whole helicopter inside, and they've been contributing that since the conflict in France began. Almost 5 days later, we contributed that C-17, and it's been ongoing. And the Prime Minister said that he would be that would continue as long as is needed.
Prime Minister said he is consulting the cabinet and opposition parties on what Canada could contribute to a possible United Nations peacekeeping mission in the African country.
The ongoing situation in Mali is a complex topic, full of economic and geopolitical layers to it, and the mainstream media doesn't always connect the dots. So to help with this, I interviewed former Canadian soldier, sociologist, and author of the book, The Globalization of NATO, Mady Darius Nazemroaya.
From 1873 to 1893, Western Europe and North America were hit by an economic depression. This economic depression was a result of the overflooding of the markets by the corporations of the day. This pushed them to lobby their governments for direct intervention in Africa to impose protectionist colonial policies in different parts of Africa and to basically divide the continent. The logic behind this was to protect their export markets in Africa and to protect their import markets from Africa, where they were bringing in raw resources such as rubber, gold, wood, what have you. They wanted to protect this and prevent other European corporations from getting their hands on this, and this is why they asked and pushed their governments to intervene in Africa, and this is when the Scramble for Africa began. The Scramble for Africa was a result of this recession/depression at the time. This economic depression was at the time called the Great Depression. Now in retrospect, its name has been changed to the Long Depression, but it's of significance to note that this is exactly what's happening now. There's an economic depression in the world /recession, and what's happening is Western European and North American companies are pushing for their governments to intervene in this continent. The seeds of military intervention in Africa started with the tragic events of September 11, 2001. The U.S., according to former U.S. General, four-star General, Wesley Clark, and former Supreme Commander of NATO, we know that the United States, that the Pentagon, and the Bush Jr. or Bush II administration planned on intervening in 3 African countries militarily. Those countries are Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. There was other countries included in that list, which were Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. And it's no coincidence that each one of these countries has been targeted in one way or another. We've seen Sudan's been divided. Somalia was invaded by the United States and Ethiopia in 2006. Syria is in the crosshairs, and Libya in 2011, NATO intervened there. The Bush Jr. administration not only planned on attacking these countries, but it also created the blueprints for AFRICOM, United States Africa Command, and its use for AFRICOM is to push out its economic rivals in Africa. This includes the Chinese, the Russians, and the Indians. Through AFRICOM, the United States has created the Trans-Saharan Counterterrorism Initiative, which is focused on countries like Mali, Algeria, Niger, Chad, and several other countries. It's also created the Pan-Sahel Initiative. It was the United States planned on intervening in these areas because it's seen these areas as places where Al-Qaeda, it said very promptly, very frankly, that we plan on intervening in these areas to fight terrorism, to expand the global war on terror into Africa. The United States Congress put the budget aside in 2011 for fighting Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and they said, we intend to go into Africa. What we're seeing in Africa is constructive chaos. What's constructive chaos? It's a doctrine that's been promoted very fondly by the neoconservatives in the United States and their allies in U.S. foreign policy. I should say is meant to divide countries. It's meant to create instability, which can be used to restructure specific targets. This doctrine is being applied in the Middle East in Iraq, where there's sectarian fighting, by extension in Syria, and we can see it in Africa. The war in Libya resulted in the destabilization of other parts of Africa because the tribal relationships as well as ethnic and linguistic relationships were not just placed in Libya. They actually went beyond the borders. As everybody knows, the borders of Africa don't reflect ethnic groups or linguistic groups because their colonial boundaries, they were drawn arbitrarily. But my point is that the war in Libya was meant to create instability in other parts of Africa. It's no coincidence that the Tuareg fighters in the north, their arms, a lot have come from Libya. Some of those arms were directly given to them by the French and the British in the conflict during Libya. Others were taken from Libyan bases and armories that were abandoned or taken over. But this is no coincidence at all. In fact, because of the war in Libya, thousands of people lost their jobs in Mali. Famine started in Niger because there was Libyan agricultural projects there that were abandoned. These economic problems have magnified the cleavages in countries like Mali, where the Tuaregs in the north have always had successionist tendencies. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb is a different story, and all the people in the north are not Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb associated at all, and the ones who are being armed by an American, French, and Canadian ally, which is the Petro-Sheikhdom of Qatar. The government in Mali, which the media here won't tell you, or the New York Times, or the BBC, or CNN won't say anything about, is a military junta. There's a puppet civilian figurehead, but he answers to a military junta that imposed itself in March 2011. A group of American-trained, AFRICOM-trained, U.S.-trained military officers in Mali took over. The irony is they took over and there was a coup just before the president was about to step down. The president, who was democratically elected, was not up for re-elections. Elections were going to come. If the government was so bad, you didn't need to, you could have waited till the elections, but they didn't, and they used the Tuaregs as an excuse. And it's this government, this military junta, that has asked for French intervention in northern Mali. I think it's also worth noting that this military junta in Mali would have never been recognized if it wasn't for French military intervention in Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire, the president was imposed by the French, and it was him who allowed for Mali's military junta to be recognized as the government. He pushed the West African countries to recognize it because he was the head of the West African Economic Community. Well, let's look at Canada's role in all these wars. We provided drones to the anti-government forces in Libya in 2011 during the war in that country. Ariane Labs in Waterloo, Ontario provided Ariane Scout micro drones to the anti-government forces. From Ottawa, Zariba Security Corporation was helping them. So Canada is not this pacifist country at all. We sell billions of dollars worth of weapons, and that doesn't even include our exports to the United States. We have mining interests in Mali, and this is why we're involved. And in fact, in the system of empire, in this second scramble for Africa that's occurring, and aimed at pushing out competitors like the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, in this second scramble for Africa, we are playing the role of the empire's henchmen.
Harper, stay out of Mali! Don't do the scramble for Africa!
One of the reasons the French are intervening against the Tuaregs is to reconquer the area. The area is being reconquered. Northern Mali is uranium-rich, gas-rich, oil-rich, and the French knew about this. After the Second World War, the French started exploring the resources of West Africa. They wanted to create a new department, just like how they wanted to keep Algeria and connect it to metropolitan France as a direct department of France or province. They wanted to do the same thing with Northern Mali as part of a region called the Organization for Saharan Regions. They wanted to split Northern Mali, Northern Chad, Southern Algeria, and Northern Niger and make it part of this region. And if you look at the areas in this part of Africa that the United States is concerned with, it's the exact same region, which is uranium-rich, oil-rich, gas-rich, and this is where all the terrorists are located, and this is where all the trouble is located. The French role in this war is as a junior partner to the United States. The French are intervening for the Americans. If we look at what happened in Libya, the French and the British took the public lead, but it was the Americans that provided the support, because the US has no stomach and knows that the public won't accept a direct, very public American involvement. That's why American involvement is always covert now, always behind the scenes, always silent, always involving drones and intelligence apparatus.
In this decade of war, the US and the Obama administration seem to cloak their wars for the new American century through trusted global institutions such as NATO and the UN. And that's what looks like is happening now. The French is handing off the mission in July to the UN. We have to be careful that just because the missions are sanctioned by these trusted institutions doesn't make it a just mission. Doesn't hide that it's a new scramble for Africa, doesn't hide that it's a new scramble for the African resources by Western Europe and North American countries.